Hello my friends, welcome to my corner. I wanted to share with you the most influential albums of my life. And the first thing I want to say is that these are not my favorite albums. Okay, that's a different list, a different video. So simply most influential. I'm going to go by chronological order. Okay, so not in the order that the albums were released, but in the order that I quote unquote discovered them throughout my life. And in terms of parameters, like what's the frame here, I decided to stay away from greatest hits albums and also from live albums. Yeah, and I do want to let you know that I am a huge greatest hits kind of person, but I decided to, focus exclusively on studio albums for this list. And basically what I'm presenting here is a kind of a musical autobiography, if you want to call it that, from the time that I was 10 to the time that I was about 17. So, like 3 years ago. That's not a lot of time, you may think, okay? Honestly, for good or ill, after I turned 17, my musical tastes have not changed that much. I'm the kind of guy who once I have my thing, that's what I do. I don't need anything else. I do keep an open mind, but honestly, there has not been a lot of change after that. So let me start with number one, of course. And I'm going to show you this one on cassette, okay? Because this is the first album that I ever bought. And it was a birthday present. And it was Michael Jackson's Dangerous. Okay, much later, many years later, I got the CD copy that you can see right here. First of all, when I first listened to it, I honestly did not like it. And you have to keep this in mind. Up to this point, I was just listening to kids' music. So this was the first adult music album that I bought. It was a huge step for me. Of course, I loved Black or White, Remember the Time, Heal the World. That was a big song for me. I really, really liked that. But the other songs took a little bit more effort for me to get into. Now, other good ones that I like from this album are, of course, Give In To Me, because Slash is there and everybody likes that, or at least everybody liked that back in 1991. She Drives Me Wild is another song that not many people mention that I really like from here. And also two more underrated songs, I would say, Keep the Faith and Gone Too Soon. These are songs that nobody really pays a lot of attention to, but I really like them. Even on a first listening, they were the easiest tracks for me to get into from this album. I would say Dangerous is Michael Jackson's most elaborate album. In terms of the musical scope of it, okay, I think it's a great summing up of his style. And if somebody asked me, okay, Michael Jackson, where do I start? What should I listen to? I would definitely say Dangerous. I think that is his best album, if you ask me. And I think it's a very good introduction and the great, idea of what he stood for. Number two, if you were a kid in 1990s Argentina, there were two groups that you could belong to. And they're not mutually exclusive or anything, but there was basically, on one side you had the Michael Jackson fans, right? And then on the other hand, you had the fans of a certain Swedish band. And of course you already know what I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about Roxette, and number two for me is going to be Joyride, right here. So here's the thing, I got Dangerous, right? A copy of Dangerous by Michael Jackson, as you know, and my best friend at the time got a copy of Joyride, and I still remember the day that he came to my house and we listened to this album by Roxette, and I was like, oh my god, I should have gotten this one. Just being completely honest with you here. What we have here is basically absolute pop fun. Okay, it's a lot of fun, and the tracks are classics. You have Joyride, Fading Like a Flower, Spending My Time, so many others, The Big L, it's like so many classic tracks right here. But other songs that I really like that nobody really mentions are Knocking on Every Door, that's a favorite of mine, Church of Your Heart. There are so many. Things Will Never Be the Same. They're all great tracks here. And I still listen to this. Okay, I still listen to it and I still love it. So I definitely need to say that Roxette was not a phase for me, as it was for so many other people. This is really a band that I still listen to. And I have the one that I just showed you is the original US version, which does not include the song I Remember You. So as you know, sometimes you have different versions of the album. And then some years later, I got the 20, it's the same cover and everything, the 2009 remaster. This one does include I Remember You on track number 6, so it has one more song, and it also has bonus tracks. So, you know, now I'm really attached. The reason why I keep these two, you know, I don't sell them or anything, is that I am quite attached to this physical CD right here, because it was the first CD that I got from Half Price Books. So it was the beginning of a great love affair, or obsession, you know, for me, however you want to look at it. Let me put it this way. When I need to be put in a good mood, this is where I go, you know, Roxette. So they're really, really close to me, close to my heart. Number 3 is the first great album from my teenage years. And this one I also got first on cassette, and it's Get a Grip by Aerosmith. Some years later I got the CD version just to have that. And you may think, well, Aerosmith had been around for 20 years by the time that this album was released. And one of the things I like about this album is that it was kind of a revival for them. I mean, think about that. How many bands release a successful record 20 years later? And I was still in Argentina at this point, and basically, you know, songs like Crying, Crazy, Amazing, you could not be there and not listen to these songs. They were all over the place, you know. So I really, really liked it immediately. I have also for this one, the European/Latin American version of it. So it also includes the song Can't Stop Messin'. Okay, if you have the US version, then you have like one track less for this album. That's why I went with this edition right here. And it has many, many good tunes, you know. Other classics, other songs that I really like are Fever, Shut Up and Dance, and then Line Up, which features very, very briefly Lenny Kravitz. So those are unknown songs from Get a Grip that are really, really nice to listen to also. I think this album symbolizes, you know, just a great hard rock at a time when everybody was leaning towards grunge. We're talking about the early to mid 1990s. So in a sense, it really marks the end of a great tradition. And that's one of the reasons why I included it here. Number 4 is something that I have mentioned before. In a previous video, I shared with you that the Ramones are my favorite band, and that my favorite album by them, which is the first one that I got, is Pleasant Dreams right here. I listened to this album and I fell hopelessly in love. It was just, you know, it was an overpowering feeling, really. It's most probably their least representative album, honestly, but you know, I had listened to some songs on the radio. I had heard She's a Sensation. What a great song. I mean, so romantic, so, you know, so naive in a way. And I bought this album based on that. I was like, okay, it has She's a Sensation. There was another song that I had heard on the radio, but I did not know the title to it. And it turns out that that was 7-Eleven, and it was also included on this album. So I was like, okay, that's it. You know, the two great, wonderful songs that I know, they're both included in this album that I got basically just for that one song. Other great tracks here, you have The KKK Took My Baby Away, which some people say that it has an allegorical meaning to it. Don't Go is another favorite of mine. Come On Now, Sitting in My Room. I really like basically the whole album, because this is, I would say this is great pop punk, you know? It's a fun album. And right after that, the Ramones released Subterranean Jungle, which was still sort of in that similar vein to, you know, Pleasant Dreams and the previous one, End of the Century, that pop phase in their career. But then right after that, they released Too Tough to Die. So things got quite dark from that point on, right? Now, a few weeks ago, I want to share this with you. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to get this album on vinyl. I was like, this is my favorite band, favorite album by my favorite band. You know, it would be really nice if I could get a vinyl copy of it. And I found it online. It was not really that expensive. You know, these days, if you buy a reissue of a vinyl, you know how it is. It's like $30 or something. And that's pretty much what this album cost. And it's an original one. Right, so I was really happy about that. It's like it was a good thing that I was able to find that. Let's go with number 5. Okay, Number 5 is Nevermind by Nirvana. Okay. These days I am more of a Pearl Jam fan, but when I was a teenager, I would listen to Nevermind twice a week. Every day on my walk to my physical education class, I had my Walkman, I would listen to this album, and it really spoke to me at the time. I became obsessed with Nirvana, basically, which I think it's understandable. At that age, I was a teen, in my early teens. I rarely listen to it now. I'll be honest with you. Every now and then I'll listen to it, but it's very rare for that to happen. So I guess I can officially call that a phase. I'm not sure. I still want to acknowledge that this was a very important album to me. At the time, I was also starting to learn how to play the guitar, if I can call it that, and I would play the riffs all the time. So there was an added dimension to that. Look at this. I have the Australian edition. Okay, it looks slightly different. I hope you can see. Yeah, there we go. So I have the Australian edition, which does not include the hidden track. Okay, so I'm missing that right there. This is an album that many people love and that many people love to hate. But I think that sometimes when you have that kind of division, sometimes, okay, that is the mark of a great thing. So, and I think that is the case with Nevermind. Number 6 is going to be my first Beatles album, which is Help. Okay, I was blown away by this. I mean, it's beyond words. Okay, I hardly know what to say here about this album. It's the Beatles. Okay, that's the best that I can do. Do you have to say anything more? Of course, it has like Help. The classic tracks here. You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, Ticket to Ride, Yesterday. All those classics. But I also like the George Harrison songs right here, like I Need You and what was the other one? You Like Me Too Much. That's a good one too. Other classics that I like are The Night Before. That's one of my favorite songs by the Beatles. I don't know why, but it just speaks to me. And the other one that I like is I've Just Seen a Face. So I always think this, how I envy the people who actually saw the Beatles emerge, like my parents' generation, for instance, because never again has there been a musical phenomenon of that caliber. You know what I mean? And it's most likely that it's never going to happen again, because the way that music is made, produced, and marketed has changed so much. So I think, that's something that we're simply not going to see again, right? A great introduction to the Beatles. It was my introduction to them in terms of an album, not just considering separate songs. So I would also recommend this to anybody who's trying to get into the Beatles. Number 7. Okay, for number 7, let me do something here. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, so for number 7, you know what's coming, right? Yes, you do. Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. Okay, both of them. I cannot choose one of these albums here. They have to be together. I consider them to be one album. Many people describe Use Your Illusion as a guilty pleasure. Okay, I'm sure you've heard that before. To me, this album is simply a pleasure, period. Okay, I just love it. I love to listen to it. I loved it back then, and I love it still. I mean, listen to these tracks right here. November Rain, okay, Don't Cry, and from the other one you have Yesterday's, Knocking on Heaven's Door, Estranged, You Could Be Mine. There are so many of these. And this album also marked the end of an era, I think. It was right before alternative music took over, basically. After this, everybody was into alternative music. So it's just one of those important albums. And as I said before, I cannot choose one. Some people asked back then, which one do you like better? Use Your Illusion 1 or Use Your Illusion 2? As I'm like, it's one album. Okay, that's why I don't think I'm cheating here if I choose as number 7 2 albums, because it's just one concept, right? It's not without its flaws. Okay, of course it's self-indulgent, definitely, right? But let me put it this way, the 90s would not have been the same without this album. And I still listen to it, I still enjoy it, and I really have to include it in this list because it was one of the albums that impacted me the most. Okay, so we arrive at number 8. And think about this, as a teenager, I inevitably developed an interest in heavy metal. Okay, that's going to happen. It's bound to happen. It's like sooner or later it's going to happen. And of course, it was Metallica, right? It was Megadeth back then and all that. But eventually, I was happy to arrive at Iron Maiden. And what I chose was this one, Killers, from 1981, their second album. I went to the record store and I had not listened to a single Iron Maiden song, but I was like, this is an important band. You know, I am pretty sure they're not going to let me down. Now, all I need to do is to choose an album. I don't know any of them, so it's the same thing, and just listen to them. So I basically chose this album based on the cover. I was like, I like this cover, let's check it out. Once again, another album that blew me away from the very first note. Okay, this was something special that happened there in the car as I was, going back home with my parents after buying this album. My favorite tracks are Wrathchild, Purgatory, and for Purgatory I actually have the single right here. Of course, it's a reissue, okay, but I needed to get this one, and because it's one of my favorite songs from the album. And another favorite of mine is Twilight Zone. Okay, so if I had to choose 3 songs from Killers, those would be the songs that I would choose. I really love the 2 Paul Di'Anno albums. Okay, actually, when I started to listen to the Bruce Dickinson Iron Maiden, which is the classic, I had to get into it, because I was coming from the first 2 albums, and I think the style is different, and I really like that. I still listen to those 2 albums quite a lot. And one thing that appeals to me about Iron Maiden, as you can imagine, is the fact that they have a huge literary dimension to them. So it's probably something I would like to explore in a future video. So look out for that. Hopefully I'll be able to put something together about the literary aspect of Iron Maiden. We have number 9 right here. And if you were alive in the 1990s, it was just impossible not to listen to Oasis. And number 9 is Be Here Now. Okay, yes, not Morning Glory, but Be Here Now. This was one of the first albums that I bought here in the US. So to me, this album is always going to be associated with that transition period in my life when I was trying very hard to adapt to a new life. It was one of the most difficult moments that I have experienced in my life. Maybe that's another topic for a video, but it was really, really tough. Let me say that. Some great songs from this album are Do You Know What I Mean? Stand By Me, Don't Go Away, All Around the World. They played those in the radio, in the TV channels back then when they played music videos and all that. But I also like songs like By My Big Mouth. I really like that one. I Hope, I Think, I Know is another favorite of mine from this album. So there's quite a bit here to enjoy. I really like the whole album from beginning to end, honestly. I would describe this as pop alternative, or maybe easy listening alternative. And I remember that many of my friends hated this album and maybe even this band when this whole type of music came out. But I've never been one to base my likes and dislikes on what people around me think. So I still love Be Here Now, especially, and of course Morning Glory and The Master Plan and other albums by Oasis. And then the last one, number 10, is this has really been the last album that made a huge impact on me, and that is Pink Floyd's The Wall. Okay, it is definitely not Pink Floyd's best album. It is largely a Roger Waters album, but this record introduced me to the notion of the concept album. And as you know, I am a reader, right? So you tell me, okay, there's an album that tells you a story, an album that has a plot. It's like a musical novel, it's amazing. I love that. So this was the first concept album that I really actually listened to. It's not a happy album, as you may know, but then at that time of my life, I was not really happy. So it resonated with me. And so did the movie. So the movie was important also for me, especially the animated parts. I really liked the animated parts. And when I saw the movie as a teenager, I remembered having seen some of those images when I was a little kid. When I was just looking at the TV and my parents weren't there or something like that. I remembered seeing the video for Goodbye Blue Sky. and being really, really struck by it, being impressed by it as a kid. Because here you had cartoons, animation, right, which you associate with childhood and innocence and all that kind of stuff. And for instance, you see this white dove exploding and then a black eagle coming right after that. And I remember being like very, very scared watching that as a kid and then seeing it again in the movie as a teenager. So this is an album that led me to other concept albums like Operation Mindcrime, The Downward Spiral, and so many others, right? So to me it was a bit of a, it opened a door for me. So there you have it, 10 albums that trace my development as a music listener. There's a little bit of everything, as you can see. You have pop, hard rock, alternative, grunge, oldies, metal, progressive. So I really feel that this list represents me. Do you have any questions, comments, recommendations? Would you like to share your most influential albums? I would really, really like to hear that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for stopping by and have a wonderful day.